And we're live at the Gray Zone. Welcome, everybody. Really glad you're here. We got a special guest today, and we're about to be live on Rockfin as well. We are live on Rockfin. We have a really special guest today to talk about an event that I consider to be one of the most important events of the past year. That's the Rage Against the War Machine rally this February 19th at the Lincoln Memorial, the afternoon of Sunday, February 19th. Rage Against the War Machine. I'm going to be speaking there. And you know who else is going to be speaking there? It's a jack-off nightclub comedian named Jimmy Dore. Welcome, Jimmy.
Hey, Max. How are you? Good to see you.
I'm good. Good to see you.
I'm looking forward to February 19th. It's good to see all the people who are attacking it, which actually means that we're doing something. So if nobody was upset about this rally, I would be worried that, holy shit, we're not actually bothering people. But it turns out that we are. And so that's why all the bad faith attacks are coming from everywhere, from every angle you can think of, you know, no matter who it is, Tulsi, Ron Paul, Scott Ritter, Jack, and me, everybody. It's
Chris
great.
Chris Hedges, Cynthia McKinney.
Yeah.
Me, Anya Parampil, Dennis Kucinich, noted right-winger Dennis Kucinich.
Noted right-winger. The guy it was so dangerous they had to gerrymander him out of a district. So that's the guy who actually, you know, maybe a little anti-establishment. Good for Dennis Kucinich. Good for being against the war. There's only one condition that I have for people who want to come be a part of this anti-war rally, and that is that you want to stop the wars. That's it.
I mean, okay, I'm not gonna want to be in there with like Sig Heiling neo-Nazis and like, you know, that Patriot Front group that looks like a bunch of federal assets and they all show up in the same Nazi costume with masks on. Like, yeah, I wouldn't want to be among them, but that's not what's going on. And, you know, a lot of times people can be right about things who I don't agree with about other things, but this is the most important cause of our time. This is about civilizational survival. February 19th, Washington, D.C. If you're serious about ending this war, if you're serious about stopping nuclear war, if you're serious about disarmament, if you're serious about de-escalation, if you're serious about peace, if you're serious about stopping imperial encroachment, if you're serious about challenging NATO, if you're serious about freeing Julian Assange and his freedom are among the list of demands that all speakers and participants have agreed to. If you're serious about ending the secret government with an over $80 billion black budget known as the CIA, which carries out terror attacks, kidnappings, and torture around the world. If you're serious about those things, you will be there. If you're not serious, you'll find ways of sabotaging this.
Well, I think that's what's happening is that, of course, you know, the reason why there is no left movement in America and there's absolutely no anti-war movement in America, it's because left organizations are, as we're finding, just like FBI was infiltrated all the social media organizations, and now the CIA is just right on camera now in corporate media. They don't even try to hide it anymore. So that they've infected every left organization, and they've turned it. What do? They divide and conquer, and that's exactly what's happened. Yeah, you know, and so that's what they're trying to do now. And the thing is, these people who want to, like, instead of participate in an anti-war rally, want to talk about, I disagree with the people who are speaking's politics. That's just ridiculous, right? So that shows that you're a cosplayer when it comes to stopping a nuclear war. That's the equivalent of saying, "You sure? I'd like to stop a nuclear war, but not with those people." I mean, it's comical. Yeah. It's comical. Yeah. That's how ridiculous it is, and it reveals those people to be unserious, insincere people who are cosplaying at anti-war. And so, if you want to be a leader, if you're a part of an anti-war organization that doesn't want you to take part in an anti-war rally, you should be a leader and go to that anti-war rally and lead. That's what leaders do. Leaders don't take direction, but leaders give direction. Leaders lead, and they lead by example. So I'm going to be there, and I hope they keep attacking it, because that shows you that it's powerful. They're calling it everything in the world, right?
Yeah.
And so that means they don't want this to catch on, because you got lefties there, you got libertarians there, you got former Congress people there and military people there. You got all types of people there, and that's what scares them. That's the only thing that scares them. If they can keep us hating half the country, and half the country thinking the other half of the country is their enemy, instead of with the exact opposite, which is that we have a common enemy. It's the military-industrial complex that is bankrupting this country. By the way, we're ending the way all empires end. They just put 3 more military bases in the Philippines recently. I swear to God, they just did that. So that's what this is all about. That's what actually scares them. So that's why they have to attack this actually extra hard, because it's got people from all spectrums of the political spectrum. And so that's why it scares them. Wouldn't you agree, Max? That's what actually scares them. If it was just a bunch of just a bunch of Greenpeace people, or if it was just a bunch of libertarians, or if it was just a bunch of it wouldn't have much impact. But the fact that it fans, that's what gives it its power. People who disagree vehemently about other things. There are people there who want to end Social Security and take Medicare away from people. That's not what this is about. This is about, we have to first stop nuclear war, and then, hey, guess what? We can fight about all that other stuff.
That's right. And one of the things that I think threatens some of the people attacking this rally is that they can't be in charge of the entire thing and decide who to exclude, because they love to exclude people. Yes. They love to come up with a laundry list of boutique social issues that you have to sign on to, every single one, and there's no debate allowed, in order to participate in a rally about something else, which ostensibly is what your organization is supposed to revolve around, which is the war state. This is the professional sectarian left that I've had to deal with for years and years and years, whether it was on Palestine or Syria. And then, on COVID, they excluded everyone from their little meeting rooms. If you had any problem with thousands and thousands of workers being fired because they didn't want to take an experimental gene therapy injection that doesn't prevent transmission or infection, they would completely castigate you. And then you wouldn't be allowed to speak at their anti-war rallies because you opposed lockdowns that sent people into suicidal ideation and opioid addiction and kept children out of school for a year. Because you opposed that, the professional sectarian left would exclude you. And what this rally is not doing is excluding people, including them. They would be welcome to speak and participate, but they don't want to. They want to attack because they've lost control, because the professional sectarian left has failed in every respect to form a viable anti-war movement for the past 20 years. And here we are. They want the anti-war movement to be 100 people all wearing the same shirt with multiple advanced degrees, who agree on all the same boutique social issues, who can fit in one room, and they control everyone and everything everyone says. And this rally has broken that model because it's just open. It's what you make of it. It's what anyone wants it to be. And so they are working to sabotage it. And I know from having worked with some of these people in the professional sectarian left that they destroy every institution that they become a part of. They burrow from within, they get in there. And then if you are trying to work for a greater goal within that institution and it doesn't follow their sectarian line, then they start to attack you from within and run campaigns against you. And then ultimately they try to destroy the whole organization unless you get them the hell out of there. And so every institution, every NGO, every media organization that they get in, they're a problem. And now they're becoming a problem within this, when all we're trying to do is stop a nuclear war. And yeah, I deeply disagree with a lot of the other speakers on things like unions or crime and these kinds of issues. I'm going to go out and I'll organize for, teachers unions to fight privatization in the future. This doesn't stop me from that. The libertarians, I barely have any, and we'll talk about them in a second. They're not going to put a chip in my brain that suddenly changes me and transforms me into some kind of crypto Nazi. I can go up there and say whatever I want, as can any left-wing speaker.
Yeah, I had a point and I just forgot it, but
well, sorry, I was ranting. But Well, let's address some of the controversies, because my friend Medea Benjamin, who's someone that, you know, I've worked with for years, who's done some of the most important anti-war organizing, is not allowed to speak. You're not allowed to speak because there's naughty people on stage. It's like Ned Flanders won't allow his kids to have sugar. Remember Rod and Todd? They're like, we're not allowed, Bart. We're not allowed to have the sugar. So Medea's not allowed by people who, like these professional sectarians who are in her organization. And so she had to issue a statement. And I find this really upsetting, honestly, that someone of Medea's stature with her experience and wisdom has to even do this and say this. And I've been trying to discuss this with her directly. She was just in Cuba. She's been fighting the siege of Cuba for longer than I've been alive, or as long as I've been alive. But Medea Benjamin said, people are asking me why I'm not speaking at the Rage Against the War Machine rally. I supported it, the rally, from the time of its conception, and I support it today, even though I will not be one of the speakers, because the organization I have been a part of for 20 years, Code Pink, urged me not to speak. The Code Pink staff, meaning people who work for her, felt that my participation would hurt the group's standing with other coalitions committed to gay rights, women's rights, and anti-racism. They felt that Jackson Hinkle has taken stands that are anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-feminist, and Islamophobia. I guess they mean Islamophobic. And they were concerned about the sponsorship of the Libertarian Party's Mises Caucus, Mises Caucus, after Ludwig von Mises, the Austrian economist.
This is exactly my joke. I want to stop a nuclear war, but not with those people. I want to spoke with people who wear pink hats and vote the right way, and have all the same sensibilities that I have. That's not how anti-war shit works.
Do you think the people in the Dawn?
That's why in the last 20 years, the war machine has fucking exploded while you people did shit like this. It's laughable. You're a joke. That's a joke.
It is a joke, and everyone's laughing at them.
That's not. So here's the thing that they don't understand. They don't understand how to fucking do anything, and they don't understand how to organize. And what they could do is take a lesson from Christian Smalls, right? So Christian Smalls organized a union on Staten Island against Amazon, right? And now the way these people would organize a union, where they go, hey, who here agrees with us on LGBTQ? Okay, you can be in our union. You can't. Hey, who here agrees with us on Social Security and Medicare? Okay, you can be in our union. Who doesn't? You can't. That's not how who here's a gun nut? You're out. Who here's a libertarian? You're out. Who here's a Proud Boy? You're out. Who here's that's not how you organize. And that's what they're pretending how you organize. No, what they're doing is revealing that they're cosplaying as anti-war people. It's a social thing for them. They're not real, because that's not how you organize anything. That's not how you organize a union. That's not how you organize an anti-war rally. You don't start excluding people on other parts of their politics. And I was talking to Jay Buffon from our Revolutionary Blackout Network. He's gay. And he said, you know, the whole point is, if I went to a rally and there was people who didn't agree with me on LGBTQ, and then maybe they meet me and then they realize we have more in common than that separates us, and they get to know me, and maybe what they thought wasn't true about me. And isn't that the way we're supposed to do this? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly how you're supposed to do it. But these people want it. It's just a social club to them. That's all that is.
Yeah. And it threatens their own identity when
it's a social club. They're not actually about converting people. They're not actually about getting people. They're not about winning people over with their arguments. They're about excluding people in a social club. Yeah, guess what? You're not an activist. You're a fucking social club, and you're revealing it.
You have to meet people where they are. Not everyone is going to agree with you out there in the Rust Belt, for example, about social issues, but more and more of them are pissed off about this war and billions of dollars going to Ukrainian warlords and Zelensky. It's very easy to break through to them about this. Maybe then you can break through to them about some other issues, but this is just about excluding a majority of people, not just in the United States, but across the global South, who do not agree about these issues either. I don't think the people waging the peasant rebellion in Peru against the illegal overthrow of Pedro Castillo will agree with Code Pink staff on all the issues, nor would the people I met in the rubble in the Gaza Strip, who had their homes destroyed by the Israeli apartheid military. And they don't care if it's some woke grad student with blue hair who's helping them get out from under the boot of empire, or if it's a camo-clad gun-toting Trumper. They just want the bombs to stop falling. And that's what we are trying to do. And let me make another point about organizing, because I went against my community to try to educate Americans about the real apartheid Israel they didn't know. And I've spent years of my life doing it, reporting from the field, writing books, doing documentaries, whatever I can do. And I've organized with Palestinians who are extremely conservative Muslims. I've spoken at the American Muslims for Palestine conference 4 times. They practice gender segregation at that conference. Okay. Women have to go into a separate entrance for men. Many of the younger women don't like it, but the constituents, that is their culture, and they actually support that. And I, as a speaker, am not going to say, well, you're separating men and women, so I'm not going to organize with you, even though you have a national coalition and fighting apartheid Israel, because the most important thing for me is the struggle against Zionism. It's for Palestinian women, however they want to live culturally, to be able to at least travel outside of their walled-in ghetto, to not have a walled-in ghetto, to not be refugees. And it's the same thing here. Do you think the people under the bombs of NATO in the Donbass, who have been being killed and massacred for 8 years, care if everyone is pro-trans at this rally?
It's crazy.
By the way, I don't agree with Jackson Hinkle on a lot of social issues. He knows that. I'll say it to his face, but
I don't agree with Ron Paul on a lot of stuff either.
Yeah.
I don't agree with Chris Hedges on COVID. It doesn't matter what you agree with people on other shit.
Yeah, I'll say it to their face, but Chris Hedges is still my friend.
He's still a hero to me.
Yeah, I mean, he was in many ways a mentor to me. And so we can disagree about many things.
And I can still learn from people I disagree with.
Well, this to me is the cause of our time. And, you know, I believe that many more people will sign on to this rally from the left who are overlooking this. But Chris Hedges, I spoke to him on the phone the other day about this rally. And the first thing he said to me was, after 9/11, the only people who were doing anything against the Afghan war were the Avakian people from the Revolutionary Communist Party. Like, I don't care if they're Maoists. Like, I'm not a Maoist, but they were out there doing something, and they were giving me a platform to rail against this war. You're right on. I've spoken on their radio shows. I think Bob Avakian's like kind of like seems like a cult leader to me, but I don't care. You want me on your show? I'll come on. But the professional sectarian left, they actually officially boycotted me because I opposed the mass firing of workers for not taking a experimental gene therapy injection, which has been proven dangerous to women of childbearing age, has been banned for young people across Scandinavia and Western Europe, and does not prevent transmission or infection. But there's no debate allowed. There's no discussion. It was like, with that, I was immediately castigated by these people. And so they are the problem. They are the problem. We need a mass movement. We're in the heart of the empire. We're in the imperial core, and we can't do it alone.
There's supposed to be, you know, we're supposed to have values, right? And what do you have values for? Not for when it's easy to follow them. You have to have values because it's going to be hard, and you're going to have to stick by those values. Jon Stewart said one time, I'll never forget, he said, if you don't follow your values when it's hard, then they're not values. They're just hobbies.
Yeah.
And so the value of free speech and bodily autonomy has to be a value. And people were revealed that they didn't really have that value, that they could give that value up just by being lied by a propaganda machine funded by billions of dollars by Bill Gates and Big Pharma. And so it was nuts what happened. Turns out we were right. Of course, the Supreme Court in New York overturns that ban on and all those. They let 70,000 healthcare workers be fired in the middle of what they called a deadly pandemic, and no one gave a shit about it. Nobody cared about those people who were treating COVID patients just, you know, weeks earlier without a vaccine, and now it's just. It revealed a lot of people, and so it made strange bedfellows. It really did. I would not think that the people who vote Democrat would be cozying up to the security state and the censors. And you know what somebody said? Hey, when can you point to a time in history when the people doing the censoring turned out to be the good guys? No, you're the bad guys. Anybody doing the censoring is always the bad guys. But what can you ever point to a problem that censorship ever fixed? No, there's never. So it's nuts to see what has happened, and it's nuts to see the dividing lines now politically, and it's nuts that people think that it's a legitimate reason not to go to a anti-war rally because you disagree with the politics of the other people speaking there. That just reveals you to be a child thinking, and it's not how organizing works.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was really instructive to me, Jimmy. You were part of this as well, to be at the Defeat the Mandates rallies, because
Right.
those were rallies where people just put aside all their differences. You had so
Right.
many random, it was a real motley crew on stage at those rallies to defeat the mandates, which were disastrous on so many levels. And, you had us on stage with Tremel Thompson. He was a union leader in New York, an organizer of the subway union. You had Joe Rose, a Harlem-based public school worker who was seeing the damage that the lockdowns and the mandates were doing to young kids, especially poor Black kids in Harlem. And she just got out there on the street corner with a bullhorn and started organizing. She organized with people who are America First types from Staten Island. They put aside all their differences. And then you had Kwame Brown, former Washington Wizards player, up there with right-wing truckers, hippies from the natural path movement. All kinds of people were up there for one cause, and it was massive. The rally that took place in Washington and Los Angeles was massive because they weren't putting up all of these conditions. It was one issue, and that's the same thing that's happening here. So it's very difficult to organize an anti-war movement in the United States right now, especially when it's a proxy war where the U.S. is providing the weapons, the AI. Basically, the Ukrainians are proxy American soldiers, but they're dying, and we don't care. The American war planners, the sociopaths, the neocons, they don't care about Ukrainian blood. They just care about sending more and more American bullets. So Americans don't see that they're coming back home draped in American flags and coffins or with their legs blown off like Iraq. And you have a Democratic president. So it's not, you're not going to get a bunch of liberals out there marching like in the glory days of the anti-war movement against Bush's Republican war.
Right.
And, Matt Gaetz, Jimmy, has just introduced a resolution, the Ukraine Fatigue Act, to defund the war.
Yes.
What is Ro Khanna and AOC going to say about that? Well, he's a racist. So
he's had, so I'm not supposed to try to end a war with Matt Gaetz. I mean, of course. I mean, doesn't Bernie Sanders work with Senator Lee? And I mean, that's what gives things power. Is when people diametrically opposed on other issues can come together on something. That's what I remember when Newt Gingrich started to come around on climate change in like 2007 and 8 and something like that, and started doing commercials about it. And I was like, holy shit, they're gonna that means that there's going to be something happening about this. Well, then that all went to shit, but that's what gives things power. Okay, so and everybody knows that, right? And so the war machine laughs when they do this, when they let woke, politics of any kind get in the way of, and people think it's bad. They're like, I remember at first they were like, well, we don't want to get negative press. And I was like, that's the only kind of press you're going to get. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
So you should hope for as much of it as possible, because it's not it's a badge of honor to get negative press from the fucking military industrial complex funded press. What is wrong with you? That's exactly what you want. I can't wait to they're already doing it. That Newsweek just put out a hit piece yesterday about this and with me, and called me a right-wing conspiracy theorist. That conspiracy that Russiagate was bullshit. Turns out I was right. That the gas attacks was also bullshit. I was right about, and now I don't know what other thing that could be. And then, okay, COVID, the narrative, they lied about everything. They lied about masks. They lied about herd immunity. They lied about natural immunity. They lied about lockdowns. They lied about transmission. They lied about contraction. There wasn't anything they lied about. And so all you had to do was look, but that's also against the cult. You can't, it's very cult-like thinking. And so you can't run an anti-war movement like a cult.
Yeah.
You have to be open to everybody, and the only thing they have to be is against the war.
Yeah. And we will see. But what we will see how successful this is. I'm not an organizer. I have detailed knowledge of what's going on behind the scenes, the organizing, the mistakes that are being made. But I'm not an organizer, so I can't be in total control of whether it succeeds or not. It's really up to all of you who are watching this to come to Washington, get offline, show up in real life, show the war state that you want to change their strategic calculus, that they understand that Americans from all political backgrounds and walks of life oppose this insane march to nuclear Armageddon that's stripping money out of our pocketbooks and putting it in the hands of Ukrainian Nazi warlords. It's your decision. You decide. Get off the chat, show up on February 19th, and send a serious message, and send a message to the sectarian elements that are trying to tear this down, that they don't control the anti-war movement, that they have failed to do anything with for 20 years. They have failed in every respect for 20 years. They don't have a record to stand on. So it's time for people across the country.
I mean, you're talking about the anti-war movement of the last 20 years. What do they have to show for it?
Yeah.
I don't know, military, even under Trump, they exploded the military budget, $132 billion. And that's not, people forget, that's not just 1 year. That's every year in perpetuity. Once they raise it, it never goes back down. It's not just this year. And by the way, that's enough. That was enough money to fix homelessness 5 times over when Trump was president. So this is how all empires end. The empire's ending. But the petrodollar is going away. So that dollar is not going to be the reserve currency of the world anymore. It's going to we are pretty close to being Brazil as it is, except for a handful of cities in America. It's people and so the bigger problem is, then this reveals this, right, too, is that someone smarter than me, I heard talking about how in the other parts of the world, the left movement is always connected to the workers and the blue collar people, and that's not the way in America. The left is like this middle class journey, and they care more about getting people of color on a board and having equity on a board instead of a minimum wage or a living wage, and getting health care for their workers and stuff like that, unions and stuff. So this all reveals it. And so what people learned, what workers should have learned through the pandemic, was that they don't care about you, and you are essential. They're not essential. You're essential. And while you were out there working during the pandemic, they didn't give you any more money, and they took $5 trillion and gave it to all their friends.
Yep.
And while they still didn't give you health care, and they still didn't give you living wage, they still didn't give you any kind of protection, and they still got homeless people living under every bridge. Yep. So people need to know that they need to lose faith in the system. Joe Biden and the Democrats are not going to stop a war. AOC and Bernie Sanders are not going to stop a war. What's going to stop a war is people getting in the streets and stopping a war. And it's got to start. It's got to start now. And the people who want to cosplay, you can't pay attention to those people. And you have to hope for negative press, because that's the only press we're going to get. So all these people will find out about it. And so everybody's welcome, even the cosplay people. Show up to an anti-war rally and learn how it goes. This is how it works.
Well, that's the thing. If they showed up, I wouldn't be like, how dare you show up? You attacked me. And I'm reading some of these attacks. The top Google result for Rage Against the War Machine, one of them says the rally's racist. So it implicitly says, I'm whatever, a racist for joining it or something. It also erases the black speakers. But, even if the author of that or anyone promoting that showed up, I wouldn't hold it against them if they just show up. I don't care. I'm not going to make it personal. They're the ones who make it personal. And just one more thing about Ron Paul. Ron Paul is 87. Ron Paul is, of anyone who ever showed up on a debate stage of the major 2 parties, he has been the one candidate who consistently challenged the war state. and sent a very strong, and he's continued to do so at the Ron Paul report, along with Daniel McAdams, who's also going to be at the rally. Ron Paul's going to be there in person. He doesn't do anything in person anymore. He lives in like Tyler, Texas he lives in Texas, and this rally is so important to him that he's coming in to speak there. And what has Ron Paul, I totally disagree with, like, eliminating the government, all that libertarian stuff. Let's get rid of the FAA and, privatize that. No. But Ron Paul always also opposed the drug war, the racist drug war waged by Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, and Jim Crow Joe Biden. And you know who endorsed Joe Biden? Bernie Sanders, the choice of the professional sectarian left. And the drug war has done so much harm to Black America, but they always wind up supporting those candidates and tailing the Democrats. So, is Ron Paul just fundamentally evil? Is he so evil that you will boycott it when Dennis Kucinich is also on stage, someone who supports a very strong public sector and teachers unions? Is it really worth it? It's obvious that there is a narcissistic tendency at play here. This is about control. This is about ego, and it's not about this is about ulterior motives.
Oh, I experienced similar things over Forced to Vote, where people, I wasn't allowed to be an organizer because I wasn't given an official badge by somebody or something, and everyone forgetting that AOC was a bartender 2 years before.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's just a way to discredit. You're right. There is a lot of egos involved, which is stunning to me. And so if somebody came along with a good idea, hey, if somebody has another war rally, I'll go to it. No problem. And I have no ego about it. If somebody, let's do it.
Yeah. And I'll, I'm not allowed to speak at those other rallies because I oppose the Branch Covidian PSYOP, but I'll still go there. Anyway, let's bring in the buzzsaw. Aron Monte's in the house.
Hey guys, that was a great discussion, and I agree with everything said. And I was thinking, like, remember in 1982 there was like 1 million people in Central Park protesting nuclear war, and it was effective. It helped lead to the momentum that caused the arms control agreements between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. And there's 1 million people in Central Park. And Max, I put the video there.
Yeah, I got it.
But it's just, I'm thinking, as whenever I see that footage, I mean, that's a fraction of what we can get out now. And how are we ever possibly going to get out 1 million people to oppose nuclear war? Even now we're in a time that is just as dangerous as it was in the early 80s, if not more dangerous. How are we going to get people out if we're so divided and so sectarian?
Maybe we promise lunch.
Promise. yeah, but then it becomes, who's the vendor, Jim? Is the vendor, are they using
is it kosher?
Yeah, is it kosher? Exactly. Are they using the proper
honestly
pronouns?
the last massive rally I went to against the system that, well, actually one of the most massive rallies I went to that was just against the two-party system and corporate politics was outside the Democratic National Convention in 2000. Al Gore and Joe Lieberman were on the ticket, and Rage Against the Machine played a free concert outside the Staples Center in LA. I was there, and they got 100,000 people out there. It was the Democrats were freaking out, and I was kind of near the stage, and I saw this group of some 20 people wearing masks walk towards the stage. They were Black Bloc, and you didn't know who they were. They all went up to the stage, gave Zach De La Rocha the finger, and then they all walked towards where the cops were and just started throwing bottles at the cops. Within 5 minutes, the police had sent in horses, tear gas the entire rally, and the entire grounds of Staples Center was cleared out thanks to 20 sectarian freaks from Black Bloc who probably were cop infiltrators.
Yeah, that's exactly what that is.
So I just see that happen again and again. Aron, let's play a minute of this March for Disarmament. Oh man, is this vintage? Is this data? Look at all those people, man.
Okay, we're at the top of the hour. We've got Jackson Brown singing.
Jackson Brown, yeah, he used to be a big donor to Democracy
Now.
Now.
Presentation of KBDI and independent producers, dozens of them from across the country, bringing you live coverage of the Peace Rally here in Central Park in New York City. And this program is being presented via satellite by the Public Interest Video Network. Public Interest Video provides alternative.
Look at the size of this. No more war. I love that animation. Warheads.
We need to know when we're on.
Look at that.
That's
Look
huge.
at that. It's amazing.
Yeah, but there's too many white people there. We need to condemn it. But I don't know. They gotta. I saw an American flag. Does that mean they're patriotic socialists? We should condemn it.
So. I think that's good.
Hold your shot.
Thank you very much. I want to thank John, Bruce, Gary Mounts for coming here too.
And this was like a happening. This was like the place to be in New York. And this was at the height of the Cold War. They would be called, what would they be called today? Kremlin.
Bueno, aquí estoy de nuevo con ustedes para darles estos pequeños resumen. Y quisiera empezar con
Spanish language media. But yeah, we get the point. I mean, I actually didn't know about how large that rally was.
It was huge. It was massive, and it was historic, and it had an impact. I mean, a few years later, Reagan and Gorbachev negotiated the INF Treaty, and things like this had a huge impact. And now we're at a time which is as dangerous, if not more dangerous, and there's nothing. And the leftists can't even organize a unified rally. And look, you know, I have to say, if I was organizing this rally, there are speakers there who I wouldn't have chosen. But the point is, I'm not the organizer. I didn't step up and organize this thing. So when someone does and puts in the work to put something together, then, you know, like either I can hold to my idealized version of what a rally should be, or I can accept the reality that this is who's doing the work. And so how can I not support them unless I just wanted to burn everything down? And so it's unfortunate to see this. And there's talk of now a new rally later on, but it's like, what's the point if we can't do all this together? And everything you said about, I'd happily welcome people at a rally who've, if they had politics I didn't like, or if they had attacked me personally, but it's not reciprocal. It just isn't. And you guys are a good example of that because of the stance you took about COVID. And it speaks to the fact that people are not actually devoted to the causes they care about. They're not. They're not.
Well, like you didn't agree with me, at least at the beginning, Aaron, and it wasn't, you're still here. And
yeah, no, of course.
Don't really.
Yeah.
I didn't really make it a litmus test for.
No. And people who do impose these kinds of tests, I think are doing everyone a big disservice. And, you know, it's not my lane. I'm not an organizer, and but I just look at this from a distance, and it's just unfortunate. But I have to blame Russiagate partly too, because Russiagate helped turn a lot of progressives into cheerleaders for the national security state, and it meant that energies were going into not protesting wars, but protesting against the firing of Jeff Sessions, for example, when Trump fired him. So
that was an important rally that, you know, during the Trump era. This is
there it is.
Jeff Sessions protests, thousands march. Oh my God. This was like a huge rally in Times Square. I remember the Revolutionary Communist Party was protesting against the firing of Jeffrey Beauregard Sessions.
Yeah.
So this this is why, because Trump didn't wear a mask, everybody became maskers. If Trump would have been a masker, people would have called him nuts. This is Trump fires Sessions. He's got to be good. So whatever Trump did, that's just their flex. It was their flex for 4 years. It still doesn't stop being their flex. And it's nuts. By the way, if President Trump wants to come speak if he's against the war, which he said he could end it, remember? Didn't he just come out and said if he was president, he could end the war in 2 days or something?
Yeah, he did. I mean, he's been railing against the war on Truth Social, so no one hears it anymore.
Yeah, I know. When do you think he's going to come to Twitter?
Apparently he has a contract with Truth Social, which he helped set up. So it's an exclusivity clause, and he can't join Twitter, which means he's pretty much irrelevant as far as I can tell. But he's been railing against the war. And you know, another I mean, I grew up in Tacoma, DC, Tacoma Brightwood. On the other side of the border, the Maryland side, was Tacoma Park. And in the 80s, around the time of that rally, Aron, that 1982 rally, and I grew up in the late 80s in DC, 90s. Throughout that whole time, Tacoma Park was like our Berkeley. It was our kind of left anti-war bastion, and they declared themselves a no nuclear zone. I remember NBC News did a report in like 1988 on how Tacoma Park hates Reagan and Reaganism and wants to end the Cold War. Today, if you go to Tacoma Park, everybody has Ukraine flags on their house. They're all like, and you know who has a Ukraine flag on his house in Tacoma Park is Representative Jamie Raskin, who's one of the most McCarthyite, fanatically pro-war members of Congress in a formerly anti-war district, solid blue, who's the son of an anti-war activist who set up one of the few ostensibly anti-war think tanks in Washington, Institute for Policy Studies. And his son was an anti-war activist who wrote for antiwar.com. So what is this about? It's kind of about status within the liberal world. Like Ukraine has become, it's kind of like getting vaccinated for liberals, or it's like, for them, you see that the flag on their lawns with Black Lives Matter signs. They see them as synonymous. And it's also the impact of R2P, humanitarian interventionist politics within the Democratic Party, where they now see wars as efforts to save civilians, civilian protection, whether it's Syria, Ukraine, Libya. Iraq was even sold to them. And I remember Code Pink sent a delegation to Afghanistan, and they came back and said, our troops need to stay there longer to save the women.
No. What? When? But that happened? Get out of here.
I think in 2009 or 2007. It was like right before the surge.
No.
Amnesty International organized in support of maintaining U.S. troops in Afghanistan. They put up posters, I think it was around a NATO meeting, demanding that troops stay in to save the women. So this is just liberalism today. And to some degree, leftism.
Yeah, and this also extends to Syria as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit.
Yeah.
It's never seen it like this before. There was always some faction of the left, like a base, even with, you know, people in the mainstream who were, you know, consistently anti-war, but that just doesn't really exist anymore. There's a few figures.
Can I just break it? I saw a clip of Rachel Maddow I played on my show.
We got it here. We can play it.
It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like this in my life. This you would, I mean, I don't. You can't.
Let's play the clip. Let's play the clip, and Jimmy, and you can react.
Right, here we go.
This is Gray Zone fan favorite Rachel Maddow, talking about her thoughts on diplomacy with Russia.
Yeah.
Was not a meeting of two clashing forces. This was not, you know, Ukraine provoking Russia when they knew they ought not to, but blah, blah, blah. You know, like the Russian mindset, like people who were like, oh, we need to facilitate peace talks here. Really? I don't know, because it kind of seems like Ukraine was minding its own business and Russia came in and stomped into their house and started setting things on fire. So there's not like a negotiation between the homeowner and the home invader at that point. So the outcome has to be specific to Russia. And we need to do our best to save and to save the Ukrainian people to the extent that they can be saved and protected, and to help the Ukrainian government and military stand up what they need to do to take care of their own people. But Russia needs to lose, because otherwise the lesson of this is that Putin can keep doing this. It's not like this is his first invasion, and it won't be his last.
Independent Americans, yeah. What an idiot. Oh my God.
Peace talks? Really? Peace talks? Really? No, let's keep fucking killing people. With LGBTQ pride.
No, the stupidest part is that, just Russia just came in and stomped on their house for no reason, and they were just sitting there like they were Palestinians or something.
And isn't it amazing how she has absolutely not one iota of the same vitriol or disgust for our occupation of Syria? Mm-hmm. Right now, we're occupying a country right next door, a third of it. Which part do you think that is? That's the oil part. And she has nothing to say about it. And she's not So she's not she can no way can she be that misinformed about what's happening. She knows that about the coup that the CIA instituted. She knows about the bombing of the Donbass. She knows that we've been arming them to do that stuff. She knows what Merkel said, that the whole point of that Minsk agreement was just so Ukraine could build up their military so they could get ready for this. She knows that they'd started increasing the bombing in months before the invasion by double to provoke this. She knows about NATO and the expansion, and she knows about all that. So this isn't her getting it wrong. This is Rachel Maddow showing why she gets $100,000 a day, because she is a psycho crazy maniac who is not it's not her being misinformed. She's informed, and she's willing to do this because there is something wrong with people like that. And we're supposed to be the antidote to that. But people in this country think that they're getting the truth from her because she's gay. And why she wouldn't lie, just like Chris Hayes. He's a nerd. They wouldn't lie. What she just did there was more despicable than anything I've seen Henry Kissinger do, or any someone mocking the idea of a peace talk in the middle of a fucking slaughter. That person is a psychopath who gets paid $100,000 a day to make sure $100 billion in death keeps getting exported to a country that's being used as cannon fodder in an economic war between the United States and Russia. And that's it. End of story. And she's not, again, she's not getting it wrong. And that is unbelievable. She's not going to get canceled for that.
Jimmy, Henry Kissinger ordered genocide in Cambodia and Vietnam and orchestrated coups in Chile. So I can't say that Maddow's more despicable.
No, I'm saying, no, that's not. No, I meant anything he said on TV about.
Gotcha. Okay, gotcha.
No, on this war, the mass murderer Henry Kissinger has made.
She's worse than Pol Pot, and you knew it. He is worse than Pol Pot and Hitler put together.
I'm glad you did that, Aaron. So some Radlib dweebs don't clip this out.
Oh, do like an hour-long segment about it. And when she talks about Ukraine, which is minding its own business, but I'm not sure she knows about what the Donbass even is or what the Minsk Accords are. The peace treaty. I'm not sure she knows that. I think she's paid not to know what that is. I wouldn't assume that. I mean, they're really
I'm a Rhodes Scholar from Oxford, so I know.
And of course, she doesn't. She like the Maidan coup. I mean, these people are certainly paid to completely erase that history. That's what they're paid for.
When I get on stage in front of crowds of people who don't know me, which I do, I just did last night here in Burbank, and that's a very blue collar kind of a crowd. And I'll say the joke. I'll say, hey, the people who lied about Iraq and then lied about Libya and then 20 years lied about, and then lied about. I bet they're telling the truth about what's happening, and Ukraine, and everybody laughs. Yeah, they know that just right there. So the fact that regular people who have jobs and real lives know more about this and are more skeptical than Rachel Maddow, who's paid to know about this, I'm sorry, that's just a psychopath. Who's worse than Stalin, Hitler, and Pol Pot put together.
Well, speaking of progressive proxy warriors, we got one more clip for you, Jimmy. This is Matt Duss, who's the former foreign policy advisor of Bernie Sanders. He bought into Russiagate, bought into the Ukraine proxy war. So now he's comfortably perched at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. A big Washington.
But I think he played a role in helping drive it as a member of Bernie's staff.
Yeah, he helped Bernie get Russiagated. He took part in that. So this is him on Democracy Now! This week, sharing his thoughts on Biden's policy in Ukraine.
Does your assessment of U.S. policy when it comes to Ukraine?
I think actually the president's version of it there, it tracks with the facts. I think the administration, as my colleague Stephen and I wrote in the piece that you referenced, the way the president has helped manage alliances and partnerships in response to Russia's invasion of last February, I think has been impressive. I think it shows a way of practicing U.S. leadership that forges consensus and then mobilizes that consensus. I mean, the war obviously is devastating. It is ongoing. We would like to see the war end as soon as possible, but I think being realistic about when that is possible is part of the challenge we face right now. I think Putin has given no evidence whatsoever that he's interested in a workable resolution of this conflict. I think he and the Russians and the Ukrainians at this point both seem to believe that they can continue to achieve their goals through military means. So for the time being, I think the administration's theory of the case is sound, which is that they'll continue to support Ukraine's defense to create the best possible moment or the best possible environment for negotiations when that becomes possible.
Matt, just
it's like you know, they're just observing the Biden administration. They're just observing and trying to find the right time to make peace. But right now, it's just, you know, not the right time. It makes it seem like they're bystanders. And in democracy now, it's like MSNBC with even bigger losers who think the same thing. I mean,
and going back to the discussion before, this is what's happened to the left. This is the left right now. Our major leftist institutions have been totally neutralized and duped into parroting the propaganda they used to challenge. Like, having worked at Democracy Now! And grown up on it, it's unrecognizable when it does stuff like this. And what's funny about Matt Tess's comments about how, Russia's not interested in a workable solution and Biden's had this amazing leadership. He was saying this just a couple of days after the former Prime Minister of Israel, Naftali Bennett, became the latest NATO ally to admit that the U.S. blocked peace talks, that he helped broker a compromise where both sides made concessions. Zelensky agreed that Ukraine wouldn't join NATO. Russia agreed that it would abandon its goal of denazification and would not oust Zelensky from power. And he said they were very, very close, but he said the West, and he means the US and UK, blocked it. Now, Bennett says he agreed with that decision. He thought it was legitimate. But the point is, he admitted that. And that's the latest source we've gotten to confirm that the US blocked peace talks very early in this war. So could have avoided all this bloodshed. So he's a complete revisionist who's ignoring that history. That's because he's a proxy war supporter. And that is where the left is at right now in so many I don't know what to say, because Democracy Now! Doesn't matter the way it used to anymore. It doesn't, because people realize that it's become a shadow of itself. But in terms of the establishment leftist outlets, this is now the prevailing view.
Jimmy,
what could possibly what could you ever imagine a scenario where you would mock peace talks?
Yeah.
What is that? What is peace? Fuck you. You got to kill some more motherfuckers. I mean, that is, I can't, I'm like a loss for words. You can't overstate how crazy that, can you ever imagine a scenario where you would mock peace talks? And she's supposed to care about people or human. She's supposed to have a shred of humanity. She just mocked peace talks in a slaughter of Ukrainians. That's what's happening. And she's mocking stopping that.
Yeah.
I mean, first of all, their idea of victory is never defined. Biden sort of defined it when he spoke in Poland and said, this man must go. Remove this man from power. He's talking about regime change in Moscow.
Yeah.
Which would lead to the dissolution of the Russian state, because it wouldn't just mean removing Vladimir Putin. It would be removing an entire apparatus that is dedicated to one thing above all else, which is stability, sort of like in Syria. And Russia would be balkanized. It would possibly be split into 5. And that is something that Ukrainian leadership has explicitly called for in their definition of victory. And you have figures like Michael McFaul, who are constantly encouraging the Ukrainians to forge ahead, throwing thousands and thousands of not just young men, but old men into the teeth of artillery instead of negotiating, because victory means total victory, means the destruction of Russia. So that's never defined. And then peace negotiations are never, whenever they talk about peace, they mock it, but they never talk about actual concrete negotiations that have taken place and what actually happened there. We're talking about the Minsk Accords, Aron.
Yeah.
The reason this war is taking place is because the Minsk Accords were never taken seriously and were exploited by Ukraine's Western sponsors to militarize it and arm it and prepare it for a war, as Angela Merkel, former German chancellor, said. Jimmy, I see you're waving. You gotta get out of here.
Yeah. But thanks for
any closing words?
I'll see you at the war rally, February 19th.
Great. Well, thanks for joining us, and we're looking forward to the stream today.
Okay.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All right. So yeah, the reason that I believe Russia invaded Ukraine is because they saw no fruitful possibility of any further negotiations, and that the U.S. was not going to be an honest broker, nor was Germany or any of the NATO states, preventing Ukraine from coming to the table. And they mistakenly thought that maybe they could force a negotiation through the invasion, which was a major error because Boris Johnson came to town. And I don't know if you read Zelensky, the Riot Act. I don't know if they promised more weapons and promised that he could go to Hollywood and be the first famous Ukrainian comedian, internationally famous Ukrainian. I don't know what they promised him.
Well, what he told them is, if you sign a deal with Putin, we're not going to back you up with security guarantees.
Yeah.
Meaning that Zelensky couldn't possibly do it because he wouldn't have anything to support him. And it'd be impossible to sell, especially to the far right of his own country, who would oppose it anyway. But it would make it impossible to do. So Zelensky was forced to basically keep the war going, and just as before the invasion happened, he was forced by Ukraine's far right to reject any kind of peace. Like, that's why in the weeks leading up to Russia's invasion, there were these last effort talks aimed at preserving the Minsk Accords. The Minsk Accords being the agreement reached in 2015 to end the war in the Donbass that began after the 2014 U.S.-backed coup. And at those talks in early February, so just like a few weeks before Russia invaded, Zelensky wouldn't even speak to the rebels. He wouldn't even talk to them. And that was a sign that there was no way he was going to implement Minsk, as he pretty much said. And that, plus the fact that at the same time, the U.S. was refusing to negotiate with Russia on any of its core demands in those draft treaties it put out in December 2021, asking for basically the NATO to roll back some, not all, but just some of its military infrastructure surrounding Russia, especially the infrastructure that expanded after 1997. The U.S. wouldn't even discuss that. So those two acts of rejectionism, Zelensky not talking to the rebels, the U.S. not talking to Russia about its core treaties, which are very detailed. These are detailed proposals. Plus the fact you have an increase in shelling by Ukraine of the Donbass. Those are all the factors that led to the war. And then shortly afterwards, then you have those talks in the first few days of the war in Belarus, right? And what did a top Ukrainian intelligence official recently admit? He said that he sent his envoys there just to stall, to delay for time, not to reach any kind of peace deal, but just to stall for time, to keep the war going. And then, just to underscore the point, he one of his negotiators was assassinated by
they killed him in broad daylight in Kiev by the Ukrainian SBU.
Yeah. So, and then you had those talks happen that Naftali Bennett talked about, which he also says the U.S. blocked. Then there were more talks brokered by Turkey, and that's when, according to Ukrainian media and sources close to Zelensky, Boris Johnson came over and said, "We're not going to back you up if you make a deal with Russia."
Right. And the Munich Security Conference a month before the invasion, where Zelensky called for joining NATO and said he regretted signing the Budapest Memorandum, which gave up Ukraine's nuclear weapons. So he wanted nuclear weapons. Essentially, it was a direct provocation and all the Western leaders backed him up, including Olaf Scholz. And yeah, as you said, I mean, we had Russell Texas Bentley from Donetsk on this show, February 21st, 2022. And he was telling me that the Grad missiles were falling on his city, that Ukraine was attacking massively. They're amassing troops on the border. That's backed up in OSCE reports. Ukraine it looked like they were preparing some kind of offensive. That was 48 hours before Russia went in. And Russell said, Russia's going to go in. They were going to invade. It's true. It's happening. And they're going to go crazy. So here we are. And people are still mocking the idea of peace. A peace rally is being sabotaged from within and without. I think it'll still go ahead and hopefully succeed. February 19th. I think it starts at 1 p.m. Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C. I'll be there. So many people have told me they're coming in from around the country. Let's make this something historic. And I forgot to mention, and Jimmy forgot to mention, Jimmy's doing a show the night before. I guess it's sold out. I can't even remember where it's at. Somewhere in DuPont Circle in Washington, but I'll be there as well. I'll be on stage with Jimmy.
Nice.
So there's a lot to there's a lot to take in. There's going to be a march after the rally to the White House, and all these people are going to be in town. I think this could be the beginning of something bigger. And so, Aron, we should also be protesting one of the worst terror attacks of our time, the worst environmental and industrial terror attack, which was carried out, according to veteran investigative journalist Seymour Hersh, by the United States military. We're talking about the sabotage of the Nord Stream pipelines.
That's right. Cy Hersh, one of the most impactful journalists of all time, came out with a story this week on how the U.S. blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipelines. And he got the inside story from a source and lays out in great detail how it went down. And the planning for this began, he says, in late 2021. And the timing there is interesting because, yes, that is when Russian troops were massing on Ukraine's border. But December 2021 is also when Russia put proposals to the U.S., these extensive draft treaties, to try to address Russia's security concerns about NATO expansion. And rather than address those concerns and try to negotiate, the U.S. instead started planning for a proxy war, or continued planning for a proxy war. And among those plans was turning to blowing up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. And why do they want to blow up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline? Well, as Cy Hersh points out, the U.S. has long recognized that if the Nord Stream 2 pipeline goes online, that would then bring more cheap energy from Russia to Germany. And that would make it a lot more difficult to wage a proxy war in Russia against Russia and Ukraine, because to do that, you need Germany on board, because Germany is the sort of financial center of Europe. And if it's not on board, then a proxy war will be impossible. And if Germany is receiving even more cheap energy from Russia, then Germany is not going to be wanting to cut that off and alienate its source of cheap energy. So the U.S. found the solution, which was to blow it up. And Cy Hersh goes through the details of how it went down, and he asserts that the U.S.
Well, before let's get into the details, but before we do, I just wanted to make one additional point, which is that the threat to U.S. empire is much greater than German non-cooperation in the Ukraine proxy war. There has been a historic effort, post-war effort, led most notably by former West German Chancellor Willy Brandt, to bring Russian energy and resources and German technological know-how together to forge a more independent European power center, to make Western Europe more independent from the US. And NATO exists as a obstacle overtly and expressly to prevent Europe from being more independent from the US. As Cy Hersh points out, that's why Jens Stoltenberg, who has been sort of a U.S. asset since the Vietnam era, according to Cy, has been chosen as Secretary General. And he's the former Norwegian Prime Minister who's fully on board with the U.S. Cy claims this attack was carried out from Norway, but the point is the U.S. does not want a more independent Germany, and Nord Stream was a pipeline to European independence. So let's talk about the details here.
Yeah, and we've played that clip before on a recent stream of Stratfor founder George Friedman, where he said that the primordial U.S. interest is severing the relationship between Germany and Russia, because them cooperating would be a threat to U.S. hegemony. And so blowing up this huge infrastructure project is a part of that. And I'm really glad you pointed out this is not just a part of the Ukraine proxy war. It's even bigger. It's even bigger to U.S. geostrategic aims. So in terms of what Hersh reveals, his article says that the operation to plant the explosives was done under the cover of a NATO exercise in June 2022, which many people speculated about at the time. After Nord Stream was bombed, people pointed out that there was this exercise going on nearby. And Hersh says that that was used as a cover for these U.S. Navy divers to plunge and plant the explosives. And then a few months later, in September of 2022, a surveillance plane was sent and then dropped basically something in the water that set off a remote triggered explosion. And 3 of the 4 bombs went off. The 4th one didn't.
And so this was carried out with a special diving team that trained in Panama City, Florida, according to Cy Hersh. Expert saboteurs. How did the authorization take place?
Well, according to Cy Hersh, it came from the White House. Jake Sullivan was the person who relayed the orders, but it was understood that they were acting on behalf of the president. And similar to what happened with Syria in basically keeping the Syria dirty war off the books and away from congressional oversight, there was some maneuvering done to basically put this in the realm of the military, so that there wouldn't even have to be a briefing to the Gang of Eight, the congressional leaders who are supposed to be briefed on covert operations like this, which is similar to what Cy Hirsch revealed about Syria. Because if you go back and read his articles in the London Review of Books about the Syria dirty war, he reported that the way that the Obama administration got around briefing Congress about arming sectarian death squads and spending billions of dollars on that in Syria is that they basically subcontracted British intelligence. And so because this was a partnership with a foreign intelligence service, that then allowed them to have a loophole where they didn't have to brief Congress. So they pulled off, according to Cy Hirsch, a similar trick here.
Yeah. And so ultimately, Biden gave it the go-ahead. He gave it the attaboy.
He gave it the attaboy, exactly. Yeah. And that's a reference to Victoria Nuland on that leaked tape where she's plotting who the next Ukrainian government will be after a coup happens, which is exactly what happened a few weeks later.
And she says, F the EU.
Yeah.
This is the ultimate F the EU.
Yes, it is.
What can you do? We just blew up your pipeline. We made millions of people uncomfortable in winter. We cost you billions and billions in revenue. We destroyed you as a political force. And where's German media on Cy Hirsch?
They're attacking him. I've heard from some German friends today who report that it's just universally, at least from their reading, I haven't checked this myself, but that Cy Hirsch is getting attacked, and some outlets are citing Bellingcat to try to make their case. Bellingcat, of course, is the NATO troll farm that we've done a lot to expose here at the Gray Zone. And yeah, so that's that's their response from what I'm hearing to Hirsch's story. But there are some members of parliament who are raising this issue. There was a plenary held today by some members of parliament in Germany who are raising this issue. So we'll see. I mean, look, Olaf Scholz, how can he politically survive this if Germany had a functioning political system? He's sabotaged his country's economy. I mean, they've had to shut down entire factories. Industries have been really, really hurt. Apparently, they keep the temperatures pretty low inside the German parliament. It's because they have to conserve heat. So people are like bundled up inside the German parliament. That's something I heard. I haven't confirmed that. That's something I heard. And then now he's also gotten played on the tanks. So he committed to send all these Leopard tanks to Ukraine, and he held it as some breakthrough because he got the U.S. to send their tanks as well. But then the U.S. is like, oh yeah, we're not going to send ours for a year, maybe 2 years. And all these other European states who initially signed on are not delivering them. This was in the Wall Street Journal this week. So Scholz is getting played. And I don't know how he can survive this politically, especially if more on this comes out.
I watched some of the debate over sending the tanks, and most of the opposition came from AfD, Alternative for Deutschland, which is the right-wing party that's considered, I mean, it's essentially under the surveillance of the German national police. It's considered, unacceptable. And then Die Linke, you have Sarah Wagenknecht and a few others from the left party. But the rest of the coalition doesn't seem to have any problem with this. So I wonder if there's any alternative to them within the German political spectrum. And I forgot to mention, since we brought up Victoria Nuland and we played this clip before, Cy Hirsch quotes it at the end of his piece. Victoria Nuland stating during the Senate, I think it was the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing, or Senate Foreign Relations Committee hearing. She said, I'm to Ted Cruz, I think the administration is very gratified to know that Nord Stream is now, as you like to say, a hunk of metal at the bottom of the sea. I mean, we have statement after statement, Biden basically telegraphing his punches, saying we will take it out back in, was it February?
Yeah.
2022. I mean, the U.S. has said, again, Tony Blinken saying it's a fantastic opportunity.
Yep. Yep.
How is there any doubt at this point? We're supposed to believe that Russia blew up one of the most important pieces of Putin's legacy other than the Kerch Bridge.
Yeah. Yeah. And look at the reaction in U.S. media. Has the Washington Post or the Times picked this up? If they do, I think it's a very big if. I think they'll only do it to try to discredit Cy Hirsch. Otherwise, I don't see any traction in the U.S. In Europe, it's a bit more discussed. The Times of London did a story. But the attacks on Cy Hirsch and the contempt he gets from people who call themselves journalists now this is one of the most accomplished journalists ever, and he has all the awards to show for it. He's had so many stories, and in so many times he's reported stories where the White House initially says this is all a lie, but then it turns out to be 100% true. Abu Ghraib, he exposed that. He exposed that the Obama administration's official story about how it killed bin Laden was basically full of holes, and the White House initially denied all that, but later on, Cy was vindicated. And he's also attacked for daring to question the allegation that Syria used chemical weapons on its own people. But there again, he's been proven right time after time. In Ghouta 2013, he reported that U.S. intelligence had serious doubts about the claim that Syria used chemical weapons in Ghouta in 2013. And so Cy reported that in 2013 and 2014. In 2016, when Obama was leaving office, he gave an exit interview to Jeffrey Goldberg of The Atlantic. And what did he say? He said, oh, yeah, actually, when all that was happening, James Clapper, my director of national intelligence, came to me and said that the intelligence was not a slam dunk. And that was a deliberate reference to what George Tenet said to George W. Bush about Iraq WMDs. So the implications of that comment from Clapper were obvious. And that's why Obama didn't bomb Syria, is because he was told the intelligence was basically not there. So Obama vindicated Cy Hirsch. And then, of course, the OPCW whistleblowers who exposed the massive deception in Duma just underscored the amount of fraud that has been perpetrated to make these claims of Syria chemical weapons attacks, and thereby showing that Cy Hirsch has been right all along to question them.
Well, some of the media attacks aren't even about whether Cy Hirsch was right. It's about whether we should even be talking about the U.S. carrying out this gargantuan terror attack. Here's Business Insider's Mia Jankowicz. I don't know if she's related to Nina Jankowicz.
That was my question too. I tried to look it up, but I haven't found an answer yet. But yeah.
The claim by a discredited journalist that the U.S. secretly blew up the Nord Stream pipeline is proving a gift to Putin. So, yeah, Cy Hirsch is discredited.
I don't know who this person is who wrote
this.
So I don't know. I can't speak to what journalistic accomplishments she has, but I'm going to guess that they're probably not the level of Seymour Hersh. Just as I'm confident that pretty much all of Cy Hirsch's detractors combined put all their accomplishments together, and they are not even a fraction of what Cy Hirsch has done. So it's so funny to me that people can pretend as if Cy Hirsch is discredited when he's he's one of the most accomplished and impactful journalists to ever live. Yeah,
but even if he's right, it's a gift to Putin.
Yeah.
Because loose lips sink ships. This is war, and we need to be able to wage this war in secret. We cannot tell the CIA's secrets because we are at war with Russia, except we're not. Are we? But, I looked at her work. It's like, what you get with all these people working, covering disinformation. They're on the disinformation beat. They're just hand puppets for the intelligence services. That's all they are. Yeah. And that's their way up the corporate ladder. By the way, Business Insider is owned by Axel Springer, who is the centrist, center-right kind of tabloid empire. He controls the tabloid empire of Germany. Bild and so many other publications are owned by Berliner Morgenpost, owned by Axel Springer, and employees of the Springer Press have to actually sign a loyalty oath to support the transatlantic relationship between Germany and the U.S. and to support the special relationship with Israel, where they have historically. So that's, Business Insider. It's pretty amazing. I don't make anyone sign loyalty oaths at the Gray Zone.
The thing is, these headlines that we show, I mean, we give them more attention than they otherwise ever would get. I don't know who reads these publications anymore.
Yeah.
All these digital outlets are failing. They just exist to be an echo chamber. They don't provide any real, I mean, sometimes I'm sure you'll have some actual authentic journalism done there. I shouldn't categorically dismiss it, but on stories like this, where it's just regurgitating state propaganda. I mean, so many outlets like this now, and all they do is provide fodder for us to make fun of. But otherwise, I don't think they have any kind of impact.
Well, what's interesting also is that many of the people attacking Cy Hirsch's piece haven't even read it, let alone put forward a compelling case of how Russia attacked its own pipeline. I mean, presumably, you know, Bellingcat would be doing like open source intelligence based on lots of all the surveillance around the pipelines, which is plentiful. They should be getting it fed to them, just like they got the Skripal supposed perpetrators' passport photos fed to them by British intelligence. But that hasn't happened yet. But this is an interesting exchange between Sam Husseini, our friend Sam Husseini, who, you know, got into the State Department briefing room, is credentialed, has been there over the years asking tough questions of the spokesman. And here he is with Ned Price, who you've actually had an exchange with, Aron, about Cy Hirsch's piece.
I'm sure you're aware of the new report from Seymour Hersh, how America took out the Nord Stream pipeline and the White House's denial of any involvement. Given the longstanding U.S. opposition to the pipeline, Secretary Blinken's calling its demise a tremendous opportunity, and Undersecretary of State Nuland's saying that the U.S. officials were pleased with the destruction of the pipeline, especially the Sweden's secretive investigation. Do you think the U.S. government's denial of involvement is credible?
I absolutely do, and I repeat it here. Anything else?
Let me follow up on that, if I might. Have you or anybody else at the State Department any communication with German, Norwegian ambassadors or other allies or officials on this matter?
On the matter of Nord Stream 2?
On the matter of the latest allegations, which give a fairly, I mean, it's one anonymous source. It is a fairly
it would not be it would not be typical for us to engage allies and partners on something that is utter and complete nonsense and that should be rejected out of hand by anyone who is looking at it through through an objective lens. Yes, go ahead.
One more aspect on this. One of the allegations that Hersh makes is that it was.
See, he really wants to get past this question.
Oh yeah. CIA in order to prevent involvement, oversight as a covert operation. Did you read the piece?
I'm familiar with it.
One of his allegations is that it was taken off.
Look, rather than let this propaganda be aired in the briefing room.
Well, Ned Price admits that he didn't even read the piece there. So he doesn't even know what he's denouncing as propaganda, but now he's starting to kind of melt down.
Let me just say, it is a fundamental misunderstanding of oversight in our U.S. Congress. Beyond getting his facts entirely wrong, as he has before, and
now he's calling Seymour Hersh a discredited journalist because he upset the State Department before.
High-profile ways. It is a fundamental misunderstanding to suggest that our intelligence community is not subject to oversight. Anyone who writes that, who writes anything like that, should not be believed on any fact that
he wrote that it was taken off of the CIA and put under military in order to prevent.
Our military is also subject to rigorous oversight.
That's my question. That's
yes.
my question.
The answer is yes.
Do you recognize and abide by the war powers clause in such a situation?
Yeah, I don't know how it ended because Sam only had 2 minutes and 20 seconds there. But what do you make of that exchange, Aron?
First of all, I love where he says no propaganda in the briefing room, when that's just his job, is to deliver propaganda in the briefing room every day. But yeah, no, as you pointed out, it's telling. He says he doesn't admit to reading the piece. He says he's familiar with it. And the point is, look, spokespeople are not given all the information. So it's quite possible that Ned Price doesn't actually know that the U.S. is responsible for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. They're just told what to say. And legally, of course, the U.S. is allowed to lie to the media when it comes to covert activities. That's law. But I'll be curious to see what the principals say and what kind of language they use, and whether they issue blanket denials, like, no, that we did not blow up the Nord Stream pipeline, this is false, or whether they issue non-denial denials, where they say stuff like, I'm not going to dignify that with a response. This is all typical Russian propaganda, stuff like that. And so I'll be curious to see if ever they get asked, Jake Sullivan, Victoria Nuland, William Burns, what they have to say about this, because they're the players here. They're named in Cy Hirsch's story. They're the ones who were involved. They're the ones who, like Nuland, who talked about how great this was. So they're the ones who should be answering these questions, not a spokesperson whose job it is to lie and spin. I mean, these are all performative displays. But great questions from Sam Husseini, and I hope the principals get questioned on this very, very soon, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say.
Well, this was an act of war, And the way the United States public reacted to a balloon flying 80,000 feet in the sky, a bunch of hot air with no weapons.
Yeah.
They treated that like an act of war. People were like ready to run out and shoot with their 50 caliber machine guns and AR-15 their Bushmasters or whatever into the sky to shoot that Chinese balloon out of the sky. Just imagine if China or Russia were blowing up our pipelines, surrounding us with military bases, putting long, medium range rocket systems on our borders. How would the American public react to that? Because Russia has not retaliated against the United States in the way that I think the US would if Russia or China blew up our pipelines. That's why this is so significant. And the American public had no say in whether to carry out this titanic act of war because it was done in secret, as Psy reports, through our secret government, the CIA. And this is what all the liberals were mad about during the Bush administration, the unitary executive, where Bush was making all these decisions on matters like going to war and torture without involving Congress, without going through democratic mechanisms, or without going through the courts. And his lawyers had come up with this model of the executive who gets to be the decider. That's precisely what Biden did here with his intelligence services.
Yep.
And Victoria Nuland, I mean, who is she? A neocon ideologue married to Robert Kagan, who conceived the doctrine of permanent total U.S. control over the entire globe and destroying any country that doesn't follow its orders, the benevolent dictator or benevolent hegemon. And she's in there making these decisions. This should be a gigantic scandal. I mean, this should bring hundreds of thousands of people out on February 19th. But the thing is, in the U.S., we don't face the same consequences that Russians face, or historically.
And our media insulates us from learning the facts, which is why Cy Hirsch had to go and publish this independently, is because there's no more room for even someone as accomplished as he is inside the establishment. And by the way, where was the environmental movement on this too? This was a huge emission of methane gas. Do we want to be allowing our government just to blow up pipelines when it serves their hegemonic aims? I saw nothing from the environmental movement on this. Maybe I missed it, but
it shows how owned the environmental movement is, to the extent that it is a movement. I mean, the Sierra Club got one of their biggest donors is Mike Bloomberg.
Yeah, there we go.
You got Richard Branson in there. It's basically the green billionaires are running the environmental movement, and they're completely in bed with the administration or the regime, if you can call it. And they said nothing. Dimitri Lascaris, our friend in Canada, was one of the few critics, I think, who pointed this out. The Green Party, the Green parties of the world, what have they said? What about the Green Party in Germany? Was Annalena Baerbock secretly happy about the destruction of this pipeline because it creates more of an impetus for renewable energy sources, for more wind farms and solar farms in Germany? Ursula von der Leyen said after the Nord Stream attacks and the shutdown on the general boycott of Russian gas that this will power the green future. She openly celebrated it, the EU commissioner. So sick people, I mean, because at the end of the day, it's average people, poor people in Western Europe, particularly, who will suffer because of this. And they're celebrating that the winter isn't that cold this year, but this isn't going to be the last winter for which they will suffer.
Absolutely. Next winter is going to be an issue as well, because they have to store enough gas, and where's it going to come from?
Yeah.
Especially if this, it's and of course, and it's also more expensive because now parts of Europe are still receiving Russian gas, but because of the bombing of Nord Stream 2, they have to get it elsewhere, like via Turkey. So it goes to Turkey and then back up to the rest of Europe, which means Turkey gets to profit off of this with transit fees, but it's European states that have to pay the markup. Right. And so, but the U.S. doesn't care. And this actually, of course, increases the dependency of, as a bonus, it also increases the dependency of Germany and other European states on American liquefied gas. So for neocons, this is just a win-win. And they've completely bullied Germany into going along with them. So whereas before Merkel had some sort of independence, and that's why presumably the Obama administration spied on her phones, and other former German leaders, Scholz is completely co-opted.
Yeah, I mean, there are rumors in Germany, I don't know if they have any substance, that the U.S. was covertly backing the Green Party, because
that makes sense to me. That makes sense to me. I mean, when you look at what they say, it's hard not to buy that, because they sound as if they're puppets of the State Department, especially Baerbock.
Yeah. So moving on to another catastrophe, a massive earthquake has struck and killed tens of thousands in Turkey and Syria. As we know, Syria has been the target of a over a decade-long dirty war by the U.S. and its allies, including NATO member state Turkey. Jihadist death squads have been armed and trained to ravage the country of Syria, to topple the government in Damascus. And when that failed, the U.S. military proceeded to occupy 1/3 of Syria in its northeast, its wheat fields and its oil fields, and is now stealing the oil, which accounts for some 80% of Syria's revenue, while the remnants of those jihadist gangs were given control over the northwestern Idlib province, which is essentially a Turkish proxy. And the rest of the Syrian state, where most Syrians live, regardless of how they feel about their government, is being starved, subjected to famine, starved of oil, and now starved of aid, as an earthquake has struck and particularly hit the northern areas of Syria that were most ravaged by the war. Aron, how are the sanctions affecting the ability to get aid into Syria?
So even before the earthquake, you had people like Elena Dohan, the UN Special Rapporteur on Unilateral Coercive Measures, aka sanctions, warning that Western-led sanctions were strangling Syria, were suffocating Syria. We interviewed her on the Gray Zone a few months ago. And so now you have a situation where you have, according to Syrian officials, international cargo planes don't want to land in Syria because the moment they do, they worry they'll be subjected to sanctions. And you have all these companies and organizations who know that if they engage in any kind of transaction that will deliver aid to Syria, that they're at risk. And so they just hold back. And this has been the case for many years now. And this is why you've had doctors in Syria having to smuggle in parts to fix medical equipment, smuggle it in from when they go abroad. And so now the country lacks fuel for its equipment, and it lacks supplies. It lacks the infrastructure because it's been so decimated by war and sanctions. Now, finally, the U.S. has said that they're announcing an exemption to allow for earthquake relief. And I haven't had the chance to look into the details yet and whether this is a concrete shift or whether it's just semantics. But regardless, the fact that they even have to go and issue this so-called exemption, it underscores that U.S. policy has been to block aid. Otherwise, why would you need to issue an exemption now if you were always allowing aid in, right? And this was underscored by Pavel Wargan, who says, what is this? So he's talking about the waiver by the U.S. Treasury Department of sanction. He says, what is this but an admission of what both the U.S. and EU regimes have vehemently denied? The sanctions act as an obstacle to humanitarian aid. That's exactly right. And it also underscores, by the way, that the real authoritarians are the governments of the U.S. and EU who give themselves the right to decide what aid Syrians can and can't receive. Did anybody in Syria vote for bureaucrats in Washington or Brussels to decide whether or not they can live?
Yeah.
Did Assad issue any orders blocking the delivery of like powdered milk or cement to affected areas of disasters in the U.S.? Of course not, because it's only the U.S. that asserts an authoritarian right across borders to decide for countries whether or not their people can survive. And it's all the more cynical to do this after spending billions of dollars on a dirty war that left the country in ruins. And both of us have seen this, Mac. We've both been to Syria now, and we saw for ourselves what a tough state it's in after a war. And I can't even imagine what Aleppo and Latakia look like now after this earthquake. But it's all my Syrian friends. Just it's horror story after horror story. And you can take any sort of little story. Like there was a Syrian based in Germany who raised about 10,000 euros on GoFundMe. And when he went to try to collect the money and disperse it, GoFundMe said we can't because of the sanctions.
Yep. GoFundMe's blocked. Credit cards are blocked for Syrians. Pretty much any Western cargo plane is not allowed to land in Syria. So there's nothing landing at the airports, which are constantly attacked by
Israel,
the Israeli military.
Yeah.
You say Mana Hassan raised almost 10,000 pounds for Syrian earthquake relief. GoFundMe won't let him donate money due to Western sanctions on Syria. We're not even allowed to donate to those in need. That's because our Western rulers' only Syria policy is sadism.
And of course, this comes, by the way, and we haven't mentioned this yet, I don't think, as the U.S. is militarily occupying 1/3 of Syria to steal its fuel and wheat. And that's a major factor in Syria's energy problems, that the U.S. steals Syria's major oil reserves and won't let them have it. And meanwhile, when Syria tries to get fuel from elsewhere, like Iran sends in tankers, what happens? Israel literally bombs those tankers, or the U.S. blocks the ships from coming because of the sanctions. So it's just the country is terrorized from without, from outside, and now it suffers this earthquake from within. And the U.S. policy is to claim it allows some exemptions to slightly ease the chokehold a little bit, I guess, but we'll see if that practically has any impact.
Well, there are many organizations that are raising money for Syrian aid right now. And one of them is the Syrian American Medical Society. And as I reported during the height of the dirty war back in 2017, the Syrian American Medical Society only works in areas held by Al-Qaeda affiliated groups that had been backed by Turkey and the CIA. The Syrian American Medical Society actually was funded by USAID. It lobbied for direct U.S. military intervention in Syria. It lobbied for sanctions on Syria. It lobbied for the catastrophic sanctions that the U.S. has to lift to get aid in. Its doctors functioned essentially as Al-Qaeda's MASH unit. They were working with jihadist gangs inside Syria to treat fighters, as far as I know. And their leadership also collaborated closely with Israel in Israel's Kogat, which is the Israeli military administration unit that oversees the occupation of Gaza, in order to go into the Gaza Strip. And they have done events with pro-Israel organizations in and around Chicago, breaking the BDS call. So this is a completely contemptible organization, the Syrian American Medical Society. And here's one group that I wanted to recommend that is able to raise money for Syrians who are living in the area where most Syrians live, and that's the Syria Support Movement. My friend Paul Arudi is involved with this group. I went to Damascus with him. I personally saw him and others go into homes to deliver aid to families who had been affected by the war. And they're hated because these families happen to live on the government side, and those people don't exist. We've just been told they don't exist, and that the only people that exist in Syria are in areas controlled by the US-backed death squads. So there's a Syria Support Movement. I'm giving an appeal to them. You can give to them. Just look them up. And it's allowed under Treasury OFAC rules now. It always has been. But the U.S. unblocked the sanctions obstructing earthquake relief. This allows you to donate directly to the hardworking Syrian organizations on the ground who are doing wonderful work. That also includes the Syrian Red Crescent, which treats people regardless of who they are, unlike the Syrian White Helmets. And we should talk about that a little bit.
Yes, we should, because they're going to be the financial beneficiaries of this earthquake, because the U.S. won't allow aid to go into organizations that operate in territory controlled by the Syrian government. So, when it comes to the U.S. is going to try to steer donations, U.S. taxpayer money into groups like the White Helmets. And Ned Price, the State Department spokesperson, has talked about this, that we have our partners on the ground in Syria. Who are those partners? It's partners like the White Helmets, who work, as you've reported, Max, extensively, hand in glove with sectarian death squads, who have been credibly accused of being involved in the Duma deception. They staged a hospital scene in Duma to make it look as if they were treating victims of a chemical attack.
Yep.
When now multiple witnesses say that basically that scene was staged. The White Helmets came in with cameras, started grabbing kids and hosing them down and filming it, and then put out that footage to make the world think that these were victims of a chemical attack. The White Helmets were also used by the OPCW in violation of the OPCW's own rules, as I reported, to collect samples, which then magically became the smoking gun in the OPCW's Duma probe for them to claim that Syria was guilty of a chemical attack. And they were, look, with Duma, you have dozens of people being killed. And if the evidence shows that this was not from a Syrian government chemical attack, as the evidence does show, because we know about that from the OPCW leaks, the question is how were these people killed? And one possibility is that the insurgents who staged this incident just took victims who happened to have been killed in a Syrian government bombing and used their bodies as props, or they were actually murdered by these insurgents who staged this scene. And that's personally my speculation. And then you have to wonder, were the White Helmets involved in that, given they played an instrumental role in spreading the allegation of a chemical attack? They were the first people supposedly on the scene at that building in Duma where the bodies were filmed. They did the thing in the hospital. So we're talking about people that are not just cooperating with insurgents. They could be cooperating with insurgents' atrocities directly. And this is who the U.S. is partnering with.
And one point I wanted to make is that the White Helmets have been involved in trying to prevent aid from getting to Syrians in the areas where most Syrians live for a long time. Mm-hmm. This was after the pandemic was declared over COVID-19. Statement of the Syrian regime's request to lift economic sanctions on the pretext of fighting the COVID-19 virus in Syria. The White Helmets were used to maintain sanctions to prevent, for example, ventilators or PPE or just any early treatment from getting into Syria, or just simply money to repair Syria's hospital system. The hospital system has been hard hit. Syrians have had a hard time getting cancer drugs, chemotherapy, because of the U.S. Caesar sanctions. And so here the White Helmets actually declaring that aid should not get into Syria, because their goal, they are a sectarian organization attached to jihadist death squads whose goal all along has been to get Syria to be bombed by the United States. They even had a forum calling for a petition calling for a no-fly zone when you went to their website for many years. They've gone to Congress. Syrian White Helmets representatives have gone to Congress, gone to the offices of neocon representatives like Elliot Abrams to explicitly lobby for sanctions. So it's disgusting that this is the only organization we're supposed to support, along with the Syrian American Medical Society. And then you have this op-ed, which is a straight up call in the Washington Post, Aaron, for
mass murder. It's a call for mass murder.
Yeah, let's pull up this op-ed. It's a call for mass murder in order to advance a sectarian political goal. The headline itself is disgusting, and so is the author. Don't lift sanctions on Syria to help earthquake victims, by Wael Al-Zayat. Wael Al-Zayat is a member of this group called Engage, which was sponsored by the Israel lobby to organize Muslims in contravention of the goals of the Palestine Solidarity Movement. I think he's been involved with the Pentagon too, but he's one of these Syrian diaspora activists who are like the Miami Cubans who supported the terror attacks by CIA-backed right-wing Cubans on the beaches of Havana back in the 1970s in order to drive a harder line and prevent negotiations between the Cuban and U.S. governments.
what I have to wonder is, so he's Syrian American. Does he have any family left in Syria? And if so,
Well,
how can he advocate for sanctions that are hurting everybody? I mean, everybody's hurt by these sanctions.
Well, a lot of the Syrians you see supporting these death-causing, blood-stained measures, who are American or European, it's a good parallel. The Miami Cubans, the people who worked with Batista and owned land in Cuba and saw that with the socialist revolution that Cuba had, they were losing their land and their status in society. There was a radical land reform program before Hafez al-Assad under the Syrian government, but it continued under the watch of the Assad family. And there is a class of Syrians who went abroad and started the Syrian opposition movement. They were mainly based in London and in Paris, but now they're based in the suburbs of Chicago. They're sort of the secular opposition. Then you have the Syrian Sunnis who are aligned with the Muslim Brotherhood, who can't stand that Alawites from a minority sect are in power. And although the majority of people in the Syrian parliament, for example, or who live in government territory are Sunni, these people are operating along sectarian lines. These are the people that took over the Syrian American Medical Society, for example. And the Syrian liberal opposition, who come from wealth and aristocracy, they saw these Islamist forces as kind of a battering ram against the Assad government and family. And so they formed this kind of coalition, not coalition, but a marriage of convenience. And it's been playing out for decades, but now, I mean, but with 2012, it really came to bear. I mean, you would see like the faces and voices of the Syrian National Coalition would be clean and secular, and then the people doing the fighting on the ground were ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And then, you know, NATO was happy to allow certain things into Syria if they were ISIS fighters. They just won't allow them in if they're food or aid or trade.
Yeah, exactly. Idlib, which is controlled by an Al-Qaeda spinoff, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, they're allowed to receive equipment and aid. So an Al-Qaeda controlled territory can receive aid, but the rest of Syria, which is under the control of the Syrian government, cannot. And that's because, as Jake Sullivan pointed out to Hillary Clinton in 2012, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. That's what he said. If we could show this from the New York Times, Max, because I want to show people how the media is censoring itself when it comes to the impact of these sanctions. This is amazing. So first, the New York Times did something rare, which is that they acknowledged the facts when it comes to Syria and the role of U.S. sanctions in denying them the right to life. So initially, if you look there, so on 7th of February, it says Syria is not able to receive direct aid from many countries because of sanctions. That's in the subheading of the New York Times, September 7th. Okay. One day later, guess what happens to that story? They change it. Now, all of a sudden, that mention of the fact that Syria is not able to receive aid because of sanctions is changed to this: as the Syrian government tightly controls what aid is allowed into opposition-held areas, border crossings with Turkey have been a lifeline. So they changed the subhead because they made the mistake of telling the truth. You can't acknowledge that our sanctions are denying aid to Syrians and thereby killing Syrians. You have to then, of course, blame the Syrian government for all of this somehow. So that was a rare moment where the New York Times allowed the truth of a really sadistic policy. And we saw what happened to it. It lasted about one day because it was changed 24 hours later, or even less.
It's shocking. What's not shocking? I mean, they probably got complaints from their puppeteers at the State Department. How can you say this? Because where their source is going to go.
Yeah.
And maybe hopefully this can be a watershed moment where first sanctions are lifted so that aid can get in, but also that sanctions are recognized as mass murder, and countries start to realize that they need to build sanctions-proof economies if they want to exist outside the boot of the U.S. government, because so much of what Syria was doing and Bashar al-Assad was doing before the dirty war was to reach out to the U.S. in good faith and to carry out internal reforms and attempt to open up. And this is how he was rewarded. Syria even had plans to build a wing of the Louvre in Damascus. They were making plans to do that.
I know that Syria gave the U.S. intelligence that helped the U.S. catch some Al-Qaeda or some other group, similar group, some operatives from that group. And they cooperated with that. They cooperated with rendition. And this is how they were repaid. But let me address one argument that you'll hear often from opponents of sanctions, where this, Ned Price of the State Department said this, that we can't possibly allow the normalization of a government that has brutalized its own people and killed so many people. What is left out from this argument is the fact that all the violence committed by Syria, it wasn't done for fun. And it wasn't done against like just mowing down peaceful protesters across the country. It was done in response to the most expensive, dirty war in history, the most well-armed insurgency in history, where the U.S., using its allies, Qatar and Saudi Arabia, along with Israel and Turkey, spent billions and billions of dollars flooding the country with weapons and letting jihadists from around the world come and fight the Syrian government. And in response to that, the Syrian government defended itself. And so that's the violence that it's being condemned for. And of course, atrocities were committed in the process because atrocities happened in war. And the point is, if you don't want atrocities to happen in Syria, don't fund a war that forces these atrocities to happen. Look at the freakout we just had in the U.S. over a balloon over the country. Okay, the U.S. spent this was the most expensive insurgency, I think, in history, or at least in a long time. And it was modeled on the same way the U.S. funded the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. They got Saudi Arabia to pay for it, which helped avoid congressional oversight, things like that. And Syria was responding to that. And you'll also hear people in the State Department elsewhere say we can't possibly normalize this government and thereby allow aid to come in because they gassed their own people. Well, that's the point of these chemical weapons allegations. They're not based in fact, as we've shown through the OPCW scandal and in previous incidents too. The reporting of Seymour Hersh has shown this, and leaks from the U.S. have shown this, that the U.S. knows actually that it was sectarian death squads that were behind these chemical weapons incidents. The point of them is not just to try to trigger U.S. military intervention, which it almost did in 2013, and which it did do in 2017 and 2018 with Khan Sheikhoun and Duma. It's also to justify policies like sanctions, denying the country the right to live by saying we can't possibly deal with this chemical weapons using regime, even though they know the truth is that their own side, the insurgents, are the ones behind these chemical attacks, real and staged.
Well, so many of the chemical attacks occurred during period before or during negotiations that seemed like they were going to end the dirty war, or they occurred as the Syrian government, the Syrian army were on the verge of major victories.
Yeah.
And so the timing was always suspicious or highly revealing, especially the Duma deception.
The timing is crazy. 2013, Duma, Ghouta, the Syrian attack there, that happens right after Assad has invited UN inspectors into the country to investigate allegations he's lodging against insurgents for using chemical weapons.
In Khan al-Assal.
Yeah, and we know now from the reporting of Seymour Hersh that the U.S. had intelligence about a sophisticated chemical weapons program by insurgents in Syria, working with allies in Turkey. Okay, so that's 2013. That's the timing.
Carla Della Ponte said
she
was that Syrian al-Nusra, the Syrian al-Qaeda wing, had sarin gas, and they were looking into a sarin gas attack by al-Nusra in the town of Khan al-Assal when the inspectors were there. So you have the inspectors in Damascus when the attack is supposedly said, this attack supposedly took place just miles away in Ghouta, a suburb of Damascus. Very convenient.
And Carla Del Ponte, of course, is the former chief prosecutor of tribunals at the International Criminal Court, very high up in the UN, and she admitted this. So that's 2013. Then 2017, Khan Sheikhoun happens. And that happens just days after the Trump administration announces that it's abandoning the policy of regime change in Syria. Just days after that, literally. Trump wanted to end the dirty war in Syria, and he got his reluctant administration officials to announce that, saying that regime change is no longer our goal. We recognize that Assad is there. We're not going to get rid of him. Right after that, Khan Sheikhoun happens, which is great timing for insurgents who are trying to turn the tide and get the U.S. back on board with its regime change goals. Okay, and then Duma in 2018, it's a similar thing. Duma happens as Syria and Jaish al-Islam, the Army of Islam, which controls Duma, that's occupied it, where it terrorized people, paraded Alawites in cages, held people in dungeons where it subjected them to torture and forced labor. They're negotiating, and there's actually a factional fight inside Jaish al-Islam. And some people who are negotiating an exit for their people, they get killed because some more hardliners inside Jaish al-Islam want to keep fighting. Okay. And that's all of a sudden when this chemical attack happens. And of course, the chemical attack doesn't hit the insurgents because they never do. They hit, we're told they only, the Syria only for some reason bombs civilians with chemical attacks, which is funny.
You usually only see women and children in the videos, which is odd.
So for example, when Al-Qaeda took Idlib, okay, this major northern province, why didn't Syria use its chemical weapons then? How come these chemical weapons attacks never hit insurgents and only really target innocent people? That's because these attacks are carried out by insurgents themselves. In Ghouta 2013, there was chemical weapons used. In Khan Sheikhoun 2017, there was sarin released somehow because it was in the samples. And in Duma 2018, these people were not killed by chlorine gas. We know that for a fact from the OPCW. So how were they killed? We don't know. But somebody murdered them, and everything there points to the insurgents massacring these people and then using their bodies as props.
And this is all the result of the red line policy. There's been very little reporting on how the red line policy came in, but I remember reporting back in 2013 how it was the Israeli government and Israeli intelligence that was supplying so much intelligence to try to devise a red line, blaming Syria for the Ghouta chemical attack. And as a former U.S. official told Charles Glass and Harper's, the red line policy was a recipe for a false flag attack. So now you see efforts to establish a red line in Ukraine. And as I said in our last stream, I'm concerned that some similar deception could take place that could drive a major escalation if Ukrainian forces falter in the face of a Russian offensive around the springtime. That's pretty much all we have time for today, unless there's anything you want to add, Aron.
Thanks everybody for tuning in and supporting us, thegrayzone.com. We really appreciate it. And it's great to do this every week with you guys. So thank you.
Well, thanks for being with us, Aron. And yes, thank you to everyone for making this one of our most watched streams. Thanks to Jimmy for joining us. And you can just smoothly transition to a Jimmy live stream now. But first, February 19th, 1 p.m., Lincoln Memorial. Be there. This is the chance to get offline and show your opposition in real life to this crazy war that's cost $100 billion of our money that we've worked for. It's time to get in the streets and rage against the war machine. That's what people want us to do who are living around the world on the other side of the U.S. guns. And they don't care who we are or what costumes we wear or who we vote for. They just want us to stop it. So let's do that. Be there. And Medea, I haven't had a chance to speak to you, but be a leader, defy your organization, and get on stage. It's now or never. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll be back next week. Peace.
Peace.